Today, Vladimir Zelensky even postponed. He was meant to be in Saudi Arabia, but he decided not to go until March the 10th, adding that no talks could be held behind Ukraine's back on how to end the war. So I thought it was time we spoke to somebody from Ukraine who would tell us what it wants and what it's willing to accept. And to that end, Andrii Osadchuk joins me now, who's a member of Parliament in Ukraine. Good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I wanted to hear your voice on this because it's missing everywhere else.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here. Definitely a lot of confusions, but if to look at all this story very carefully, I don't think that there are a lot of surprises. You remember Trump was promising to end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours by calling Putin. Then it appears to be not so easy. Finally, he made a call. Finally, they had a meeting today. The biggest conclusion of this meeting that they agreed on nothing. In fact, the official statement from the United States that they agreed to continue finding the way how to agree. So meaning it was a zero result attempt. Definitely it is big diplomatic success of Moscow and for Kremlin and for Putin. But again, it's not a surprise because Trump months ago was saying that he absolutely does not agree with the policy of Biden, which was about blocking of any contacts with Russia. So that's why the reopening of the contacts with Moscow was very much expected. So that's why it's not really surprising. But definitely it's a challenge. It's a challenge not only for Ukraine, because I'm repeating for the last 2 years that Ukrainian war is not the issue of Ukraine. The bets went so high that for the last couple of years it's understood that it is European issue. Is the issue of national security of European countries and United Kingdom. And definitely it's not acceptable neither for us, nor for European Union, nor for UK that both sides of these talks in Saudi Arabia said that we don't want neither Ukraine, nor Europe, nor any other actors around the table. So that's why by definition, it's not acceptable. By definition, neither Ukraine nor we believe our allies in Europe will accept any decision which can be taken without our participation. But the good news that I strongly believe that Trump team will not be able to reach any deal with Moscow. Believe me, because for Moscow, it's absolutely existential war. They lost so many people. Ukrainian army was able to destroy almost 50% of Russian army, almost 50% of all military warehouses, which was established since Soviet era. So the Russians are so angry, not Russians, it's not correct, the Kremlin and FSB is so angry that we are resisting for 3 years. They are so angry that Europe and UK is helping Ukraine. So that's why their plans was not changed at all. So they want surrender of Ukraine and the West. That's their target. And yes, they will try to cheat Trump people. Yes, they will try to discuss other issues. I don't think that you was right saying that they were talking about Ukraine 4.5 hours. I know that there were a lot of other topics, and definitely for Russians and for Americans, other topics are also important. But my feeling and my expectation that they will reach no agreement. And as faster Trump people understood that it's impossible to reach any peace deal with Kremlin, as better for all of us. Because what we will work for is to create a strong Europe position on this. I think it's very important to have one voice.
It seems, first of all, I'd like to address how Vladimir Zelensky and you as an MP and others feel about this. I mean, is this a humiliation? And if it is this deliberately done? I mean, Moscow is even questioning the validity of sitting down with Zelensky because the last elections were missed. So they're dismissing him. It feels like it is a deliberate humiliation.
Look, we're too adult to be humiliated from Vladimir Putin, who is for us criminal, and not only for us, for International Criminal Court, he is criminal. And I would emphasize that it is ridiculous for any democratic politicians or even citizens to discuss any words of Vladimir Putin about democracy and elections. Vladimir Zelensky is a legitimate president of Ukraine. Myself is a legitimate member of the parliament of Ukraine. We cannot conduct any elections because elections is not just the word, it's a democratic process. We cannot do that. Just an hour ago, it was another drone attack on Kyiv. With 4 million people inside, we have every night attacks. We have 1 million people in the Ukrainian army. We have 7 million internal replaced persons. We have not less than 5 million adults in Europe. How you can conduct elections, meaning democratic elections, and
but that is said, surely that has been said to try and humiliate Zelensky.
No, definitely what Putin is doing is to trying to humiliate Zelensky and to trying to provocate any internal instability in Ukraine. Look, the fundamental result of 3 years of resistance of Ukraine, that Russian army can do nothing with Ukrainians, despite they're bigger than we, despite that they have more weapons, and so on, so on. They can do nothing. They have lost minimum 300,000 people being killed in Ukraine. Can you imagine? 300,000 killed, not less than 600,000 injured. That's absolutely dramatic losses for Russia, but they don't want to stop because they don't care about their losses. And yes, now they will put all their energy inside Ukraine, try to destroy Ukraine from inside, as they previously did or trying to do in Ukraine during the last 20 years. The same what they did in Georgia, by the way, the same that they were trying to do in Moldova. So that's very typical FSB approach. So no surprises at all.
Well, what the question is, and I read a lot about this, is that it seems like that both sides are entrenched here. Russia has been told, it seems, look, you can keep that land. Ukraine is saying, no, you can't. We want that back. Pete Hegseth is saying that, oh, well, it would be crazy for Ukraine to believe that they can go back to the borders that they had nearly 3 years ago. That would be stupid. You know, just let them have let Russia have that land. And by the way, they're not going to pay reparations. And by the way, you can't join NATO. What does ideally Ukraine want? What will Ukraine accept in a peace negotiated?
Look, first of all, we will demand respect to the thousands of innocent people being killed. We will demand respect to the heroes of Ukrainian war. Nobody was believing in them because everyone was giving us a week, but we are fighting for 3 years. Then we will demand the recognition of Russian war crimes. They killed thousands. They flattened hundreds of villages and cities. It's a war crime by international law. And again, we will demand respect, at least some general highlights of international law. Because if we will ignore all that, we're pushing all of us into chaos, especially if you see that the rhetoric of Trump and Putin sometimes is very similar. I think the only way for us in Europe to survive is to keep together and to demand the respect of international law. We are very realistic. We understand that we are not physically able to take back the territories which are temporarily occupied by Russia. Yes, because we're weaker. But from another side, don't forget that for the last 2.5 years, Ukraine never had enough weapons from the West. Never. We were receiving some limited portion of military equipment as from US, as from Europe, by different reasons. And in fact, we were not allowed to success in this war, especially when we had a chance in the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023. So that's why, yes, we are very realistic, believe me. But what we really want, we want not just to have a ceasefire. We want to have a guarantees that this nightmare will never, ever repeat it again. I want to remind you about the war in Chechnya, which Putin did 20 years ago. First war they lost, but they took a pause for 2 years, and then they came back to Chechnya and, in fact, killed almost everyone. I'm sure, I know that they want to do the same with Ukraine. Because, again, for Russians, for Kremlin, it's a huge defeat already. Because they haven't got what they want, and as I said, they already paid a huge price. But it doesn't mean that it will stop them. So that's why the critical issue for Ukraine and for the Europe's safety and security is to give the clear answer. What can stop Russians? What is the guarantees, safety guarantees for Ukraine which will work? My answer is very simple. We need Western troops inside of Ukraine, and we need long-term program of investments into Ukrainian military manufacturing. And it is already growing because almost 30% of all ammunition we do by ourselves, which is huge. But we need to increase investments to our military manufacturing. And yes, we need more weapons supply from the West. For one simple reason, that we are fighting with one of the largest military capabilities in the world. Weekly, we are using more rounds that UK produce annually. Can you understand these figures? So
well,
the dynamic of the war is huge.
I know
the resources which we need is huge.
Yeah, you're spending 37% of your GDP at the moment as well on the war effort. I just want to ask you a question about what's going on in the region of is it the Donbass at the moment? When we look and see that you've got Belarus. My understanding is there are Russian troops there on military exercise. Is that right? In Belarus?
The Russian troops are there during all this time. And I want to remind you that the regional attack on Ukraine on February 24, 2022 was also from Belarus. Kyiv was attacked from Belarus 3 years ago. And since that time, we know that Putin done dozens of attempts to involve the Belarusian military directly to warfare in Ukraine. But Belarusian dictator Lukashenko, he's a very smart guy, and he understands that it is extremely risky for him to directly participate in the warfare in Ukraine. So till today, there was no Belarusian troops in Ukraine. But Russian troops, they were in Belarus. And we will not surprise that they will try to repeat some kind of attack from the north. But the reality of the warfare for today, that Russia has a lot of problems with people for the front line. You know that they're bringing people from North Korea, they're bringing people from Africa, from Asia. So despite huge size of Russian Federation, even for them, it's very difficult to recruit more and more people for the front line. In fact, the only model which works in Russia, they pay huge money for any newcomer, huge money even for any country in the world. So if I'm not mistaken, more than $25,000 is like an entry ticket for any new soldier who is joining Russian army. Said that, yes, they are in Belarus, but we see that they still have a very hard time in the other parts of the front line. And we don't think that they have capacity and human power to organize any new attack from Belarusian side.
Is it possible to reach a satisfactory peace deal with Russia? Again, my understanding is they're already talking about removing NATO membership from countries to go back to the, was it the 1997 era of NATO membership. Russia seems to just keep asking for more and more. Is peace going to be possible?
You just gave the answer on your questions. When FSB is here, the word negotiation, for them it's demonstration of weakness. When they see that their counterpart is weak, they demand more, and more. In fact, talking about NATO, and in fact, saying about the fact that Ukraine is not in NATO today, it's not because something wrong with Ukraine. It's because the veto right on NATO extension is in Moscow, not in Brussels. And yes, as they see that the Brussels and everyone is weak, yes, they are demanding pushing NATO out of Baltics, out of Poland, out of Slovakia, meaning that Russia is fighting not only for Ukraine, they are fighting for domination in Eastern Europe because they want to rebuild the reputation and strength of Soviet Union. They never hide that. They do this very openly. And yes, it's not just direct threat. It's a new chapter of war if Ukraine will collapse. So that's why everything is too serious to continue all this endless discussions. They cannot stop the warfare simply because they went so far in changing their economy, because now they operate like a military factory. And they went so far in propaganda inside Russia that, believe me, they cannot stop. The only way how they can stop if they understood that the oil is dropping to $40 per barrel or less, and if they will understood that Ukraine and the West is stronger than they are today. So that's why we all just need to spend much more money for our safety and security. United Kingdom and the Europe shall dramatically increase military manufacturing. And unfortunately for the Europe, the only capable army which can protect Europe is Ukrainian army. So that's why we need to act jointly and think about our victory and not try to look at the eyes of Putin thinking that we can find any peace there. They don't want peace. They want war.
It has been fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you'll come and talk to me again. Andrii Osadchuk, who's a member of Parliament in Ukraine.